going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 live stream for the Sanderson Farms Championship. Going to go through a preview for your DFS and prop exposure. But first off, look at the fantasy side and how I'm building for my Draftkings exposure. And then afterwards, we're going to take a look at the stat averages, give you a game plan for underdog and prize picks, all for your round 2 lineup. So by the end, you'll be an expert. You have all the info you need to go out there and get started with all of that. And we're going to keep this one a little bit quicker. We've got Thursday night football in about 15 minutes. So our goal is to be completed right around then. So any questions, feel free to fire on them now. Just get them in early before we wrap this thing up. But smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. And let's get this thing rocking. So the golf course today played a little bit easier in the afternoon. The wind died down for the last hour or so, but the warmer temperatures were, in my opinion, the bigger factor between the two waves. And with the weather forecast looking extremely flat for tomorrow, it's probably going to be a lot of the same. So you can see today it was about a 0.3 shot difference, which is big enough where we can't completely ignore it. And for tomorrow, it looks like the winds are going to be almost stagnant, which was essentially what we got for today. Again, it laid down for the last hour or so, which I don't think was the bigger of the two factors. And tomorrow, in the last couple hours of play, it does look like the wind gusts died down a little bit as well. So that afternoon wave could play like a quarter of a stroke easier, but I'm not personally counting on it. I'm going to have guys from both sides of tee times. Weather really isn't a big concern for me in my round 2 DFS exposure. But if you were gonna try and break a tie, everything was 50-50 and you had no possible way to choose between two players. One was AM and then one was the PM. Maybe you go to the PM guy, but it's more about ownership to me. It's more about building a solid player pool, which is what we're going to focus on here now. And because we got to keep this one moving, it's going to seem quicker because it is. We're going to try and hit on all the major points. And the major point with ownership is going to be the top 15 highest owned players. These are from my projections, which are already up for my Patreon members. And yeah, play ended about 15 minutes ago, and we do already have those up on the website. And these are your top 15 highest owned players. So it's a lot of your 9-10K options, as you would mostly expect. But what you start to see in Showdown, as opposed to main slate, is the leaderboard starting to bleed into it. You've got players that bias players that played well the first day. You know, your casual golf watcher will assume that because somebody started hot, that they're going to keep that going for all 4 rounds. Somebody probably will, and they'll end up being your champion when it's all said and done. But over the next few days, that list of candidates is going to start to get whittled down. So your players like a Thorbjorn Olesen, also a Kevin Yu at $9,600, you're starting to see them get a little bit of extra steam because of how they played today. But your Postins, your Rico Hoies, you can say that about, and then even some 8 and 7K range players, you're seeing starting to sneak into this top 15, and in particular, the ones that played well today, like a Max Homa with his -5 rounds. And Semi Valimaki was pretty chalky for main slate. He had a respectable -2. That's why he's popping up. Same thing with the Jesper Svensson. He was on a lot of people's radars, including my own. Right, obviously bet him outright. A lot of other people were using him in their DFS lineups. Players like that shot anything like -2 or better, you're going to see it 10% plus ownership. So these projections can be found on my Patreon page. It does have the entire field projected, but these are the players that you've got to worry about the most. And it's not like they're all unplayable. There will be players, and there are players towards the top here that are in my exposure. It's just that when you're using them, you've got to be careful about using them together. Using maybe 1 or 2 of them in a set of 6 players isn't the biggest worry, especially if you've got low-owned guys mixed in alongside them. But if you've got 3 or 4 of these top 15 players in your set of 6 in a set of 6 in a lineup, then that's when you have to start to be a little bit more worried about it. So game theory, lineup construction, always something that we're talking about here on the live streams. And Showdown is, of course, another example of that. Over on the right, we've got my player pool tags. This is what I'm looking for in my player pool. And this is always a hot topic when we're talking about Showdown, is making sure that you're very intentional about who you're playing, not just picking names out of a hat and just hoping to get it right. You want to have a rhyme and reason. You want to be very intentional, as they said, about who you're using so that you can critique it afterwards, be able to try and improve your process from slate to slate, and also to whittle out some of the random plays that you're throwing in. Those usually aren't doing you a whole lot of positive. And there's enough players, 130 something in this field, to choose from where you don't have to be picking names out of a hat. So I look for ball striking poppers, people that had strong rounds off the tee and on approach. I look for guys that were good with their short game regression, so that were decent off the tee and on approach, but could really be better around the green with the putter. I also look for course history players that have excelled at Country Club of Jackson, and then high upside players. These are high birdie percentage players that go out there and do a lot of scoring, which is massive for your Draftkings exposure. That is, of course, directly correlated to your Draftkings score, which is why I focus on it so much. So that's the top end of ownership. Again, the rest of it can be found on the Patreon. Let's take a look at the shots gained metrics, because as you could tell with some of those player pool tags that we have, they're important for our round 2 process. It's not the entire process looking at these round 1 results, but it does help us with finding those ball striking poppers and short game regression candidates. So let's show you what that looks like. And by the way, if you have any players you want me to deep dive, now is the time for it, because after we get through this, it's going to be props for the last 5 minutes or so. But when we're talking about ball striking, that is off the tee plus approach. It's literally just adding those 2 categories together, and that is how you're hitting the golf ball. That is consistent from round to round. That's what we can really count on from players from day to day, and that's why players, people that are handicapping the sport, fixate it more than anything else. So players like a Michael Thorbjornsen, Kevin Yu, are towards the top end of the list here. It's another reason why I have them as 2 of the top 5 highest owned players, is not only did they play well, but they did it in a very sustainable fashion. And a lot of people are going to try and get behind that. So these guys that gained 4.5, 5 strokes ball striking, you're going to see that kind of ownership increase. But when you go further down the board to this like 2 to 3 stroke range, like so the guys that I'm hovering over right now, they're not going to get nearly as much steam, and they were still playing some really solid golf. So this is really where I start my research when I'm trying to break down a slate. And of these top, 10 to 20 players that we have on the board here, I've got over half of them in my exposure. So a good portion of these players that hit the ball well, I'm using. And in fact, of those chalky options, I'm playing at least one of those 2 chalky guys as well. And if there's a reason or a player that I will use at one of the highest ownership marks on the slate, by the way, Showdown, because it's only 18 holes as opposed to 72, there's even more variance involved with the 18-hole slate as opposed to the whole thing. So you want to be fading chalk even more because of that. But I'll use a chalky option if they're checking 2 or 3 of the boxes that I'm looking for, right? If there's a rhyme and reason for it, you can do so in moderation, but you don't want to have 4 or 5 of those guys together in lineups. So a few other ones that kind of stand out to me, Tom Kim really hit the ball well, Thorbjorn Olesen as well. Both have been playing some solid golf over the last month or so. Rico Hoey continues to stripe it, but could not make a putt for his life. So somebody that, you can count on from that perspective and can be due for some short game regression. Kevin Roy makes a lot of birdies and he hit the ball well. That's somebody that I'll be using. Thurston Lawrence gained 2.5 strokes ball striking. He's one of my outright picks of the weekend. You can see that the short game wasn't that special for him. So another player that's on my watch list for the next day. Luke Clanton, look at that. Another ball striking stripe fest from my boy, but lost 1.5 strokes putting. So he's another player that I'll be going back to. This is how I use the ball striking stats to my advantage. And then with the short game, let's start with the guys that gained a whole bunch, because these guys are a big red flag, as opposed to the guys that gained a whole bunch of the ball striking and it being a really good sign. These guys that gained 4, 5, 6.5 strokes putting, like you see there with Sam Ryder, it is very hard to believe that's going to happen in back-to-back days. In fact, these guys that gain 4, 5, 6 strokes will oftentimes lose 2 to 3 the next, just due to statistical regression. And of all the 4 categories, your off the tee and approach play are the most consistent from day to day, because that is your physical golf swing, something that you have a lot of control over. The around the green and the putting, which is what constitutes short game, are the exact opposite of that. You're susceptible to bounces on the ground, imperfections on the greens, a lot of things that you cannot take from day to day are impact those 2 categories. So that's why we try to fade guys that gain a whole bunch of strokes in these categories. It's not so much that they're guaranteed not to play well the next day. That's not what we're saying here. It's that they're overrated. A lot of these players that shot -3, -5, -7 rounds are going to be higher owned than their peers. And while some of these players are 6K guys that you weren't going to see in the top 15 of that ownership, their ownership, which is like 3 to 5% in most cases with these guys that you see up here, is 3 to 5% compared to 0.5 to 1% to the players that are priced around them. So while they're not the 10 to 15 percenters that we went through together with the ownership, they're just as chalky, just in a different perspective at the bottom end of the board. So you're going to see me trying to stay away from most of these guys. Same thing around the green. A lot of these poppers are just, I think, fool's gold for a lot of people out there. It's not to say that they're automatic fades, because I want to point out Luke List at the top. My guy Luke List, we've been tracking him for the last few events. I think he's primed for a breakout. He's won at this course before. So with the course history, I just want to say, there are players that I'm making exceptions of with these shots gain metrics. That's what I meant before when it's not the end all be all, by the way. This is just one part of your process. But these guys that lost a whole bunch putting, that were decent with your ball striking stats, are due for some short game regression. And these are the players that I'm actively looking to play. So in Alex Smalley, for example, we talked about him in yesterday's live stream. He's an extremely volatile, aggressive player. Did not have his fastball today, obviously, with the +2 score. I would go back to him at low ownership in some of your showdown lineups. Or Norlander, who's got elite tier course history. He gained ball striking, but lost 3 strokes putting. Like, it's hard to believe that that's going to happen in back-to-back days. Your Buckleys, your Steven Fisk, all of these guys, most of them up here, I guess with the exception of this Grant Landry guy, most of these shots gained profiles with the ball striking were half decent with a whole bunch of losses on the greens. And you're going to see a lot of these players in my player pool as well. So that's another aspect of the shots gained metrics that you can use. But just like I was showing you before, we've got course history mixed in there. That's why having my spreadsheet and all the course history tab on there is really important for doing that research for yourself. But also high upside players. Those are high birdie percentage that is just posted on the PGA Tour website. So if you go to pgatour.com, go to stats, you click on scoring, and then you go to birdie or better percentage. The players that are in the top 50 there that you have in this field, and in particular, the ones that are lower owned, absolutely fantastic plays for round 2 showdown, because without placement points, and there are no placement points in your round 2 showdown exposure, it is all about the amount of birdies that you're posting. So you want to prioritize that at all costs. And that's what I'm looking at in round 2 showdown, guys. And see if there's any questions. After that, we're going to wrap this up with some prop talk, which I've got some goods for you guys there in a second. What's going on, Sites? What's going on, Hoobs as well? He said, thank you for all the help, Luke. Of course, man. He said, I'm the man. No, you're the man for showing up and showing all the support here. He said, your worst golfer is -3. Yeah, it's a good start, but it's, only one round, so I don't want to get too excited about it. But I'm glad to hear that you're killing it even more than me. I mean, -3 or better at all 6 spots is tough to beat, that's for sure. He said he went back to Thor, even though he burned you last time out. And I think that's a great lesson for the rest of the chat. You get burned by a guy, then variance ends up going the other way in the next tournament, and you end up getting paid off on it. So we call that flop lag, something that a lot of us pros do for certain slates. And yeah, you're glad you went back to him, huh? He said Mac Hughes started off the planet poorly. He said potential bounce back. This is a course that he's won at before, so I wouldn't throw it past him to go out there and have that kind of a bounce back. He said he think that he was bogey free on his back 9. The momentum's nice to see, and I want to look at the shots gained metrics because I like the course history. That's really enough there for me to play him. But yeah, he lost off the tee, at least gained with his approach play, and then he lost with the short game. He's not going to lose short game all 4 rounds. He's a fantastic player. Around the green with the putter, yeah, this is a bounce back candidate for sure. And, the cherry on top, and maybe even the most important aspect there, is that he's shown elite upside at Country Club of Jackson before. He said Nico Højgaard, 1 through 10. Let's take a look at the stats. I like his high birdie upside. He's number 9 on the PGA Tour in birdie or better percentage. He gained off the tee, lost a little bit on approach, and then the short game really lagged behind. I needed him to make 5+ birdies today, so it was unfortunate that he only got to 4, burned me there. So maybe I should be going back for round 2 showdown. And with this kind of a stat profile and that high birdie percentage, I think it's a mighty fine, reasonable take. In fact, I just want to double check my initial player pool to see if I had him in there. If not, I think I'm going to add him just out of what Golf Tool was saying before. You don't want to jump ship early. And I'm just double checking on the other tab right now. He is in my preliminary player pool because of that high birdie or better percentage. I wasn't sure whether it was going to be ball striking, whatever category I put down for him. But yeah, the high upside aspect has me playing him. So 7, maybe 8 out of 10. He's not one of my favorite plays, but he's one that I'll be using for sure. He said, smash the like button, y'all. Yeah, you heard my guy Jay Hoobs down there. Go ahead and do so if you guys haven't already. And then for the prop side, we obviously don't have boards yet. The round just ended. They're going to be posted probably in the next hour, hour and a half. But I do want to go through some of the stat averages here because for your research, for breaking down and trying to find some props you like, this is going to be extremely useful. And just for a quick refresher on the weather, it looks extremely similar to today. It's in that 9 to 10 mile an hour range. That's exactly what we had for Thursday. And the wind gusts are only about 15 miles an hour on average. So it's almost a carbon copy with conditions. Pin locations are going to move from day to day, but today's pin locations, I was able to take a look at them after they were posted last night. They were about average. They weren't easy. They weren't hard. So for round 2, we don't have the pin locations quite yet, assuming that it's a somewhat easy, or, I should say somewhat average set of pins. I don't even want to say easy, just a normal set of pins. For the Sanderson Farms, these averages aren't going to move very much. So something around -1.5. I would say if it plays to with an easier set of pins, maybe that goes to like a -2 average. Your birdie average, though, should be about 4 per round again. If it's easier pins, maybe it goes to like 4.2. Your bogey average was 2.3 per round. That was almost exactly what we called for in yesterday's stream. That'll probably stay the same. Again, it could get slightly easier from day to day. And then your fairway and green averages at 7.4 and 12 per round, those I would not expect very much movement whatsoever. So something between 7.3 to 7.5 fairways hit per round. And then your green average, something between like 11.8 to 12.2 greens hit per round. So pretty good barometers to use for your round two exposure. And I will say that your elite tier players that we have posted on sites like Underdog, Prize Picks, you're projecting them for 1.5 to 2 shots gained to the field. So with the field average at like -1.5, that puts them at about a 69 projection. So if we get some of those elite tier players like a Bhatia, a Minwoo, et cetera, those kind of guys at 69.5, I'll be a buyer on their unders most likely. I'll make sure that the sportsbook lines aren't terrible on them or anything, but as long as it's a somewhat reasonable line, I'll be taking those where I can. And then with the birdie lines, it was about a 4 average. You give me an elite tier birdie maker, and I'm not assuming that they're going to post like a Bhatia at 4.5, which by the way, they did post this afternoon. I took him at 4.5. He was at -160 towards the over when it locked, so I felt pretty good about that. He also hooked at 4. So I had a couple of real close calls. By the way, those were hooks on full cashes on slips that I ended up just missing out on. So a little bit salty about those. But if you give me that level of player at 4.5, it'll be a snap take. I mean, I'll bet it in an instant. In fact, if you did it on the actual sports books, which they don't really post birdie lines on Hard Rock Bet, it's kind of unfortunate. But if you're at a state that has Draftkings, Fanduel, and they're posting those elite tier guys at 4.5 and close to even money, I would snap take it on a player like an Akshay. And I would extend that to Minwoo Lee. He's the same kind of player I would throw into that kind of a conversation. But even your players that aren't elite tier talents, but like your Nikolai Højgaards, and it's kind of hard to think of them off the top of my head, but those sort of players, like top 10 birdie makers on the PGA Tour, I would also highly consider for their over at 4.5 birdies. So that's what I'm thinking. Fades are still going to be there as well. We hit on every single fade that I took for round number 1, whether it was unders on fairways, those absolutely printed. They post guys at 8 fairways again that are below average fairway percentage guys. I'm going to fade that all day. And then if they post guys at 13.5 greens again, which they did for round 1, and they had some below average green players at 13 greens, then I'll fade them. One of those was a Jacob Bridgman I took for an under at 13 greens regulation. He didn't even make any bogeys today. He played a really solid round, but he went well under that 13 green regulation mark. And he was at 12.5 and juiced towards the under on books. So not only did we have the juice in our favor and the 0.5 bump and the push equity at 13, but he went under by like 3 or 4 greens. So those are the kind of things I'll be looking for. Maybe some fades on these bottom 2 categories. And the reason for that too, the reason why they were so free today, and I knew they were going to be, is it's a dry course. It has not rained there very often. It's not rained over the last couple weeks in Mississippi. As long as it doesn't rain over this golf tournament, it's going to be bouncy. You're going to see about the same averages as what we had for round number 1. There should be value on those boards unless the pick'em sites adjust. And if they do adjust, that means there's probably going to be value on the flip side, right? They're probably going to over adjust in a few spots, and then maybe we can attack some over value. But they're usually pretty consistent from round to round. They tend not to make too many overreactions from round to round. So if they post anything consistent, it'll be a lot of unders, but a lot of that comes down to pricing, of course. And then at the bottom, you can see the averages for the Alfred Dunhill links. It's the 3-course setup, and the one that you're going to have for the guys that are on Prize Picks is Kingsbarn Golf Club, which was the easiest of the 3. And what's to note is that almost all the really good players today played at Carnoustie, and that was the hardest of the 3 courses as we called for, but the courses in general this year just got roasted. So we never really had a chance. I mean, the scoring average was -2, and that's where they had Harry Hall. So Harry Hall is a better than average player. We were cooked pretty much from the onset on that one. But what we know now is that these courses were set up very, very easy, and I'll show you guys why. Because they look at the weather. They're not dumbasses, right? At least I hope they're not. And maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I'm assuming that they look at the weather and they see this kind of weather for Friday. You can see that it's 40-mile-an-hour wind gust, rain during a lot of the play in the afternoon. If this comes to fruition and they have to play through what looks like an absolute typhoon, then it makes sense that they set it up as easy as they possibly could, because when they have that kind of weather, and it's a pro-am, by the way, so there's amateurs alongside your professionals, they have to make it playable so they can finish in under 6-7 hours. So I think that's probably why it played as easy as it did today. It was relatively windy, but it wasn't overbearing like it's going to be for tomorrow. These averages are going to get harder. So Kingsbarn, it was set up like an absolute cakewalk. It played -4. It probably still plays to a -3 average, because the players that were at Kingsbarn today, by the way, weren't the best players in the field. They were probably the worst players out of the bunch that you have playing this golf tournament. So now that you have the best guys going from Carnoustie to Kingsbarn, I think that that's going to offset some of the conditions. Like, it's going to be a little bit harder, but that golf course set up as easy as what it was for round one probably still plays around -3. And, I'll be the first one to say that it's extremely hard to predict what's going to happen with 40-mile-an-hour winds, because you would think it's going to be brutally hard, almost impossible out there. But after the averages that we had for round one, it's hard to say that. I mean, even the old course, it's a major championship level course, played -3.77. Carnoustie is the hardest Open Championship course. And if it's not the hardest, it's the second hardest of the bunch that they play over there. It played -1.89. Like, that's a birdie fest on the PGA Tour. That's unheard of around Carnoustie. That's why we have to set our expectations a little bit differently. So, and when we take a look at the board, it's only birdie better matchups that they have up for now. They may add on top of this at some point. So when they post the boards later for PGA, you guys know I'll be breaking those down. For all my exposure, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. Just like the spreadsheets I was talking about before with my projections, those are posted over there as well. But because I like giving you guys something to tail with the community, make sure to check out my X/Twitter. I will be posting some exposure over there for you guys to go out there and play with me together, whether that's on the sports books for free balls, heads to heads. I'm going to be breaking those down. I'll probably throw at least one or two of those on Twitter, as well as something for Underdog and Prize Picks. And it might be a combination slip between DP World Tour and PGA. It might be a PGA only, kind of depends on the value that we're getting. But you can find that on my X/Twitter, which is in the description of this live stream, as well as the Patreon link as well to get all of the extra stuff that I'm posting over there. And that's where you can find the spreadsheets and every single prop, slip, and bet. So that's all, guys. We're at 8:23. We went a little bit over time when it came to Thursday Night Football. Let me see if there's any last-second questions to go through. But until round 3, best of luck with everything that you guys are entering, whether it's in the large field GPPs. I hope to see you guys at the top of those contests, whether it's with our prop exposure, betting exposure. Let's cash out, add to the bankroll. And by the way, round 1, meant to do the recap on that. They cashed out on one of the 2 pick'em slips. The first one, Poston, Rasmus, that ended up hitting for us. And then we also ended up hitting on 2 of the matchups. That was the Thurston Lawrence 3-ball. We also hit on the Luke List head-to-head for +100. And then the third matchup that we took ended up pushing. So we got a refund on that. That was the Ben Coles versus Norlander one. Overall, ended up being, what is that? +1, +2, +4, a 3.4 unit day of profit if you were tailing the stuff over there. So we're going to try and add on top of that. Again, that will have to be posted on X/Twitter just because of the timing of it. Let's see what we got in the chat. You said Cooch for the top 10. Man, he's playing good golf. He's consistent. And, after round 1, he's in a good position for that kind of thing. You got to let me know the odds. Maybe tweet at me, Joseph, and let me know the odds on that sort of thing. But I like Cooch's game and the way that he's trending in general, man. He's looking like his old self. But that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys for round 3 live stream tomorrow night.